Syphil is a gamer who just lost his max-level character during a huge war event he organized, but all of his friends had a lot of fun, so he has no regrets. His war was apparently so popular that he ended up receiving an offer from the dev team of the game, and since he's excited to see what they have in store for him, he clicks accept without a second thought. However, he probably should have read the terms and conditions because a moment later he finds himself in a strange room with tons of people staring at him. And to make matters worse, his family jewels were missing too. He realizes he has somehow been placed in the body of his character, Lufez, and the people seem absolutely terrified of him, so he attempts to politely ask them what's going on. However, as soon as Lufez's mouth opens, an immense pressure fills the room, and everyone inside is pushed face down to the floor. Outwardly, Lufez is condescendingly asking the group if they normally taste the floor whenever they meet someone new, but inside, Syphil is just freaking out because he has no idea why all this is happening. Just then, he remembers that Lufez has an intimidation skill that's probably causing all of this, so he tries to calm down and turn it off, but it takes a few minutes for him to figure it out, so the people have been stuck to the ground for a while. Once things finally go back to normal, Lufez walks up to one of the elves in the room and asks him for an explanation, to which he promptly faints out of fear, but she eventually gets the answers she's looking for. Long story short, 200 years have passed since she was sealed away and the demon lord is still alive, so in order to defeat him, the kingdom attempted to summon another hero, which is how Lufez ended up here. This means Syphil really was sucked into the game and he's honestly really excited about it, but he realizes it must be terrifying to be in his presence while he possesses Lufez's body, so he should probably leave soon before he gives someone a heart attack. Just then, Lufez speaks up and she tells everyone that she understands their concern regarding her presence since she kind of nearly took over the world at one point, but she assures them that her conquering days are over, so they don't have to worry. Although she also has no interest in becoming their new hero, so she says they can just forget about her and summon another one or something because she's not sticking around. The king asks her where she plans to go, so Lufez tells him that she's just going to spend some time appreciating this world for what it is, but she'd be willing to come back if the need arises. Lufez then takes off and Syphil somehow completely understands how Lufez's wings function, so he is able to use them without much issue. Lufez was Syphil's main when X-Gate originally launched, and thanks to the game's novel system, actions taken by gamers were officially added in as lore, so with all the time and money Syphil spent getting Lufez to the top of the leaderboards, she is generally recognized as one of the most terrifying characters in this world. He could have stayed at the top of the leaderboards forever if he wanted, but that would have been way too boring, so instead he made a deal with all the game's top players at the time and had everyone split into the light and dark factions so they could have an all-out war. The war in question resulted in Lufez being sealed away in a subspace after her defeat, and while it was a lot of fun for Syphil, for this world it was reality, so Lufez is almost universally feared here for what she did. Mind you, the entire time Syphil and his friends were enacting their little war, they completely ignored the game's main objective of slaying the demon lord, so Orm is still alive and has been that way since Lufez was sealed, but that's not anywhere near the top of her priority list, so she'll deal with it later. Right now, she just wants to experience the game world that has now become a reality. Lufez's first stop is her old Malfil base of operations, and it is truly an impressive sight. Granted, it's a little rough around the edges after 200 years of collecting dust, but it's still amazing to see it in person. Lufez takes a seat on the throne and Syphil starts thinking about all the good times he's had with his friends in this place. He recalls how they have fun chatting about a bunch of nonsense all the time, but that he realizes that those discussions were all in a group chat. So why does he remember it as though he were there in person? Just then, Lufez notices someone approaching, which puts her on edge since the base should be empty, but when she takes a look, it turns out to be a blue-haired girl named Dinah. She is really excited to see Lufez since she has been waiting 2 centuries for her return, but Lufez has no idea who this chick is. Dinah is incredibly hurt to realize that Lufez forgot about her even though she was her most loyal advisor, but Lufez doesn't remember ever having a use for an advisor in the first place. However, now that he thinks about it, Syphil recalls that when he was building this base, he thought it would be cool to have an NPC in the background to make the place feel more alive, so he placed Dinah and just kind of left her there. She must have gained consciousness when this world became reality, and Syphil feels kind of bad since she was stuck here by herself for 200 years, so Lufez plays along and says there's no way she forget about Dinah. She thanks Dinah for protecting the base while she was gone, and Dinah is incredibly grateful to hear such kind words from Lufez. But putting that aside, with all the time that has passed, Lufez is out of the loop on the current state of the world, so she asks Dinah for a quick history lesson to catch up with modern affairs. Dinah says she'd be more than happy to explain everything she knows. So she tells Lufus that after she was defeated, the 7 heroes went on to found their own separate nations. 4 of them have already died due to natural causes in the past 200 years, but the 3 with longer lifespans are still around. Lufus can't help but wonder whether the heroes in this world are really still his friends or if they became NPCs, so he plans to pay them a visit sooner or later. Next, Dina explains that the Demon King, Orm, is still alive, and that's mainly because the 7 heroes failed to defeat him after they sealed Lufus away. In other news, Dina says that Lufus's 12 heavenly stars are still around as well, though most have gone their separate ways. The 12 stars are a group of rare and powerful monster NPCs that Sephiel collected because he thought it would be cool to have a small army of elite generals serve under him. Lufus asks Dina if there are any updates on the 12 stars, and she says she knows the location of 6 of them, but 2 of those 6 seem to have joined the demon army in an attempt to get back at the heroes who sealed Lufus away. Lufus is a little disappointed to hear that some of her minions joined the demon army over her defeat since the beef was never that deep, so she's going to have to chew them out once she finds those 2. With that aside, she's glad that she at least has something to do now. Her initial plan was to just go around exploring the world for fun and find out whether the 3 remaining heroes are players like her or not. But first she needs to go round up the 12 heavenly stars because she'd be responsible if any of them went around causing trouble for no reason. She asks Dina to give her the location of the first heavenly star, so she pulls up a map and points to a place called Svel. This is where one of the heroes has been living for the past few years, and the heavenly star, Eris, has been trying to invade it for months now. Now that she knows where to find Eris, she immediately starts heading out to find him, but Dina yells for her to come back because she can't just leave without making preparations. First of all, Lufus has no money on her, and Dina would have been willing to give her some. Inflation's a pain, and she's been waiting so long that all the money she had is practically worthless now. Lufus says she can just earn some more money along the way, but Dina tells her no one is going to want to do business with the legendary conqueror. Lufus argues that there's no way anyone would recognize her face after 200 years, but she is reminded that races like elves exist, and a bunch of them are bound to know who she is, especially since the kingdom has probably issued a public warning of her arrival. However, if Lufus wants to earn money, then Dina knows of a job she can do that doesn't require a background check: adventuring. To get started, Dina leaves Lufus to the trade city of Ydalir, but she would draw too much attention with her dark wings exposed, so Lufus sticks them in her oversized cloak as a disguise. She hates how uncomfortable it is to walk around like this, but they don't really have much of a choice in this situation, so she'll just have to deal with it for now. Once they arrive at the Adventurers Guild, Lufus mentions that it feels nostalgic to be back in the den of misfits and degenerates since, according to her lore, she was an adventurer before she founded her dark nation. However, she soon realizes how weird it is that she feels a sense of nostalgia from this when it is technically her first time setting foot in the guild. Dina notices that Lufus seems lost in thought, so she asks her if something is wrong, but she just brushes it off and says they should go take a look at the job board. While they are searching the job board, Dina spots a job that pays 3,000 coins, and all they need to do is find a bunch of lost cats. Lufus agrees that it seems like a really good deal, but it'd take ages for them to actually find the cats, and she'd rather not spend a week on a side quest, so they keep looking. Just then, they find a nice hunting job that'll pay them 1,500 coins, and all they need to do is hunt a few orcs, so Lufus thinks it's perfect. Orcs have a 3% chance of dropping their meat upon death, and if you eat their meat, then your max health gets a boost, so she's going to do a little HP farming while they're out there. Later that day, the two arrive at the village where the request was made, and they speak to the village chief, a tired old man who just wants to end things once and for all. He explains that the orcs have been ravaging their village for a long time now, kidnapping their women, killing their men, and destroying everything they've built. He begs the two to get rid of them for the sake of this village, and Dina cheerfully assures him that he doesn't have to worry because Lufus will wipe those orcs out without a doubt, and he is really grateful for their help. With that said, they head out into the forest to track down the orc den, and before long they manage to find it with 2 orcs posted out front as lookouts, so Lufus starts getting ready to attack. Come to think of it, she hasn't actually checked her stat screen since she got here, so she pulls it up, and fortunately, she still has all her max level abilities, so killing the orcs shouldn't be difficult. But she's not sure if she's mentally prepared for it, since killing these things on screen is completely different from killing them in real life. She activates one of her abilities and creates a dozen swords at her side before launching them straight at the orcs, and the resulting mess is absolutely disgusting, but for some reason, Lufus feels oddly calm about it. Moments later, the orc nest is alerted to the presence of an intruder, so they all rush out and surround Lufus within a few moments. They also have a really big orc as their leader, so any normal adventurer would be in trouble, but when they begin their attack to Lufus, they are all so slow that they look like they are barely moving. The difference is so great that she realizes that she probably won't even need to create any more swords to handle them, so she takes off and starts chopping the heads off the orcs at top speed. She's so fast that the orc leader has no idea what's going on. All he sees is the heads of his men flying off their bodies. She then stops and looks at the big guy just to say, "Hey, I just wiped out your entire squad. What are you gonna do about it?" It goes on a rampage trying to smash her into the ground. But it's way out of its league because Lufus is practically a walking calamity and he is just an obstacle in her way. No joke, all she did to the Orc King was slowly fist bump his head, and a second later, a gaping hole was punched through its head. So she's just way too strong. After Lufus is done with her massacre, Dina begins harvesting some of the orc corpses, and she is delighted to find out that this one still has its tenderloin intact. According to Dina, the vitality of an orc is stored in their tenderloin, and if it is undamaged, eating it transfers that vitality to the user. She offers to prepare some for Lufus once they get back, so she creates a bunch of portals and stores the corpses away. Lufus had no idea that Dina had ability like this, but having teleportation will definitely come in handy eventually. But for now, it's time for them to rescue all the people who were kidnapped by the orcs. To Dina's surprise, after getting all the women out, she finds out that they all seem to be in perfect health. Lufus doesn't think it's all that strange since in the game's lore, orcs are actually really nice to ladies. They're just really ugly and have incredibly low charisma stats, so they don't even bother trying to riz anyone up and skip straight to kidnapping. Dina is shocked to hear this since she can't imagine such hideous monsters being gentlemen, but regardless of how they treated their captives, it doesn't change the fact that they still kidnapped the women in the first place. So Lufus creates a giant rock fist and smashes the cave to make sure there are no survivors. Dina asks Lufus if she would like her to erase the memories of the girls, since she would want them to have to recall the ugly faces of the orcs that kidnapped them. But Lufus' genuine reaction is, "Why did you just casually suggest memory wiping like it's a normal thing to do?" She asks Dina if it's really possible for her to wipe someone's memories, and she responds saying it's really easy. In fact, if she wanted, she could manipulate and overwrite a person's personality, but aside from how creepy it is that Dina is just able to do that on a whim, Lufus doesn't think it's necessary to alter anyone's memories over an incident like this. They just need to get the girls back to their village safely, so Lufus summons a golem and has it carry everyone on the journey back. Things turned out really well for this mission, but Lufus can't help but wonder why no one else accepted it before they came along. Dina explains that it's because there was no incentive to take the risk, but that makes no sense to her since the orc tenderloin vitality alone would have been more than enough reason to take on the challenge. However, Dina informs Lufus that most people wouldn't take on the risk because, to put it simply, the warriors of this era suck. For instance, Dina says the nation that summoned Lufus is called the Sword Kingdom, and she wants her to guess what level the kingdom's strongest swordsman is. Since it'd be their strongest fighter, Lufus assumes the dude must be just as strong as she is, but to her utter shock, she is told that the kingdom's best swordsman is only level 120. This makes no sense since she knows for a fact that there were tons of people who reached level 1000 alongside her in the game, but Dina reminds her that those were all people from the previous era, and quite frankly, they were the sweatiest of sweats. Realistically, to attain level 1000, one would need to fight constantly, every second of every day, and devote their entire life to getting stronger. And the people of this generation simply can't do that. At least not without dying in the process. Lufus now understands why it'd be difficult for the people of this world to hit the level cap, since to her this was just a game, so it was natural to grind as many levels as possible. But to the people of this world, this is their one and only life, so they wouldn't want to waste it. Lufus and Dina eventually make it back to the village, and the villagers are all so happy to be reunited with one another. The women are all incredibly grateful to Lufus for bringing them home, and Lufus is glad to see them all so happy. But if they knew her true identity, they might not be so cheerful right now. The village chief presents Lufus and Dina with the agreed upon reward, and after checking, Dina confirms that it's all in there, so they are ready to leave. However, before they go, the chief asks Lufus if it is really okay for the village to keep her golem. Lufus says she doesn't really mind leaving it behind, so they should just use it as a guardian to protect the village in case more orcs show up someday. The chief is so touched by Lufus' kindness that he assumes that she must be a messenger of God, but that's nowhere near the truth. Lufus decides it's time to leave, but before she does, the villagers ask her to at least tell them her name so they know what to call their savior. Without thinking, Lufus attempts to reveal her identity, but Dina steps in and gives the villagers a fake identity instead. Lufus is pissed that Dina cut her off like that, but they've been over this already. If anyone were to find out Lufus' true identity, then it'd cause mass panic, and they can't have that. Since they've acquired enough money to cover their travel expenses now, there's nothing stopping them from heading straight for Svul. But Lufus can't be too happy about it since the only reason they are going there is to stop one of her 12 stars, Ares, from continuing to attack it. She also needs to confirm whether the surviving heroes are truly her former companions or not, so her first stop will be to meet with Megrez. As they approach the city, Lufus begins to notice several pretty lights floating all around them, so she asks Dina what they are, and it is explained that those lights are little specks of mana floating around because the land here is so rich. She says it's proof that they are getting close to the nation of Skull, and in fact, Dina can already see it from here. She seems really excited to be here, but Lufus doesn't see what's so great about it since it just looks like a regular water town to her. They head down to the front gate, and there a guard yells out that anyone seeking entry into Skull needs to have their passport ready. Lufus had no idea they would need a passport to get into the city, so she starts worrying that they might not be able to get in. However, Dina isn't concerned at all because she has the perfect skill for this: document forgery. She simply walks up to the guard and presents 2 passports that she created for herself and Lufus, and after checking them, the guard is convinced that they must be real, so he allows the 2 to enter the city. As they walk through the streets, Dina explains to Lufus that the city of Svel was founded by the wise elf, Megrez, and it is well known for the wealth of magical knowledge it possesses. This area is also particularly rich in ambient mana, so several mages and scholars come here in hopes of furthering their knowledge of magecraft. Dina asks what their objective in the city is for today, so Lufus tells her that first, she plans to pay Megrez a visit since there are a lot of things she'd like to talk to him about. Dina freaks out upon hearing this because she thinks Lufus intends to storm Megrez's castle, but she assures her that this is just going to be a peaceful visit. After all, Ares has been causing Megrez a lot of unwarranted trouble, so she still needs to apologize to him for that. But before that, Lufus says she'd like to head to a library since there's still a lot about this world's history that she doesn't know. They start asking around for directions to the nearest library until they end up meeting a man named Grants. You can tell that Lufus and Dina must be new in town because practically everyone knows that all the libraries are located in the eastern section, but he's got some free time on his hands, so he offers to lead the way. Dina thanks him and introduces herself as a traveling merchant with Lufus as her suspicious employee, but Lufus stomps on her foot mid-sentence to get her to shut up because who the hell introduces their companion as suspicious? Grants can definitely tell that Lufus looks suspicious, but he doesn't intend to hold it against her since he's sure she must have her reasons, and Lufus is grateful for his understanding. As Grants guides them through the city, Dina comments on how lively everyone here is, and Grants agrees that the people here certainly are cheerful. But since the city has been under attack from Ares for the past several years, most people don't end up settling down here. Lufus' expression soars a little since she realizes the situation here is kind of her fault, and Grants notices this, but he assumes she must just be uneasy about the threat of being attacked by Ares while here, so he assures her that there's no need to worry because the city's defense system is impenetrable. He explains that the entire lake around the city is actually a golem created by Megrez, and every time Ares is attacked so far, he has been repelled by the city's guardian golem. Lufus scans the lake and discovers that it is indeed a golem, and while level 500 doesn't seem all that impressive to her, the million points of HP it has is definitely an incredible stat, so if Megrez was able to create something like this, then he must be really skilled. Grants then directs Lufus and Dina to the city's monorail and tells them that this will get them to the eastern section in no time. Dina and Lufus will have to continue alone from here, so they thank him for all his help, and he wishes them luck with their library visit. As Grants is walking away, Lufus takes a quick look at his stat sheet, and he turns out to be level 82. That's technically really low, but by the standards of the fighters of this era, Grants is one of the strongest. Dina asks Lufus to come along so they can get on the monorail, and now that she thinks about it, she doesn't recall ever seeing monorails in the original game. Once they arrive at the library, Lufus heads straight for the history section so she can find out what happened in the 200 years she was sealed away, but as she is searching the shelves, she finds a few books that seem pretty unusual. For instance, these 3 talk about how the 7 heroes were idiots for sealing Lufus away, and she thinks it's strange that the library is allowed to have books like this when the city is run by Megrez, one of the 7 heroes. Dina reminds Lufus that Megrez didn't establish a dictatorship or anything, so the people are free to say whatever they want about him. And it's not so much that they dislike the 7 heroes, but rather the people don't actually think Lufus was evil in the first place. While people were certainly terrified of her at the time, over the past 200 years that fear has been forgotten, and some people started to realize that Lufus' rule wasn't actually that bad. According to one of the history books, Lufus was a mysterious Blackwing that showed up out of nowhere and united the world under her rule in the blink of an eye 200 years ago. Though she was strict, she was not a tyrant. So many were actually better off under her rule, but humanity ended up rejecting her reign and sealed her away to take back their autonomy. This by itself wouldn't have been an issue, but the only thing keeping the demons at bay that entire time was the threat of Luphas and her 12 stars. So once she was sealed away, the demon army took advantage of the situation and rose to destroy humanity. Naturally, the heroes tried to stop them, but their power fell short and they ended up being defeated. Since then, a lot of the land belonging to humanity has slowly been taken over by the demons, and now they are on the verge of being wiped out altogether. Luphas starts internally freaking out after hearing that because she had no idea the world was on the verge of destruction. That war she started was just meant to be a fun event between players, but no one warned her that her decision would plunge the world into such a dire situation. The library trip has helped Luphas realize what she needs to do, so she tells Dina that they need to go find Ares immediately. However, moments later, the entire city begins to rock as a massive earthquake shakes the foundation. An alarm is immediately raised, and all mercenaries available are called to the borders to prepare for an imminent attack. Luphas looks at the resulting damage and asks Dina if it is normal for a city like this to experience earthquakes of this magnitude. As far as Dina knows, this almost never happens, so Luphas concludes that this must be a result of one of Ares' skills, and he must be on his way right now to launch a full-scale attack. There's no time to waste, so Luphas creates a glider and tells Dina to get on immediately. As they are flying towards the chaos, Luphas puts some thought into the situation, and none of this makes sense to her. She knows Ares was always such a harmless sheep monster, and that it's not in his character to invade a nation like this repeatedly, so she wonders if this is really just because she was sealed away. And on another note, she wonders why she even has memories of Ares in the first place, since she never actually interacted with him in the game, but her main concern right now is to stop him, so she can worry about her memories later. When Ares was a little lamb, he was roaming through the forest on his own when he happened to run into Luphas. She was surprised to see a rainbow sheep out here, since it's a legendary monster that's said to only be born once every 500 years, but as she approached it, it recoiled in fear and began crying. Luphas noticed its tears, and if she had to guess, the sheep had likely been on the run since birth, hiding from both monster and humans alike, since a single thread of its wool is more valuable than gold. She won't deny that he has a good reason to cry, but she asks him what point there is in shedding all those tears. She tells him that if he is upset about his situation, then he had better be ready to strike back against those who would come after him. Otherwise, he had better prepare to live the rest of his life drenched in sorrow. The sheep took her words to heart and attacked Luphas to show its determination to grow stronger. And she liked its fighting spirit, so she put the sheep down and asked it to come with her. She told him that she wasn't at full strength yet, but she would one day conquer the entire world, and she wanted him to become her first companion. She asked it if it had a name yet, and the sheep shook its head, telling her no, so Luphas looked to the stars before coming up with the name Ares. At least that's how the story went. At present, Gantz and his men are all running out to intercept Ares' forces, because this is clearly the beginning of an all-out assault. Once he arrives on the front lines, he sees a massive army of monsters slowly marching towards the city's gates, and he's starting to worry because there's no way he will be able to hold off this many until the main army is ready for battle. The earthquake earlier must have been Ares' declaration of war, since regardless of his hatred for them, Luphas made a rule saying he isn't allowed to attack without making a declaration first, and ever since, he has followed that rule religiously. Before long, the city's advance force arrives, so the order is given for all the mages and archers to fire before the monsters get too close. After wheeling down the monster, the soldiers begin their charge because they need to keep the monsters at bay until the main force arrives. Gantz is out in front and begins mowing down monsters left and right, but while he may be doing alright, his subordinates aren't as strong as he is, so a lot of them are being slaughtered. At this rate, Gantz doesn't think they'll be able to hold out much longer. However, just as the troops were about to be overrun, countless ice spikes came raining down from the sky, and as the soldiers looked back towards the city, they saw Megrez and Livia, the water golem. They are all relieved that their guardian deity has arrived, and Megrez tells them they can all stand back now because Livia will handle the rest. He then gives Livia the order to attack, and within moments, dozens of monster forces are annihilated in one go. Meanwhile, Luphas has been watching the battle unfold from a distance, and she had planned to step in if the situation became dire, but with Livia and Megrez on the scene, it doesn't look like her help will be needed after all. Speaking of Megrez, Luphas decides to check his stats to see if they are still as good as they were when she and Megrez played together, but to her surprise, he's only level 500 now, and he is afflicted with a debuff called the Curse of the Vanquished. Luphas has never heard of a curse like that before, so she asks Dina if she has any idea what it is, and according to rumors she had heard, after the heroes failed to defeat the Demon Lord, they were all hit with a curse that sealed away half of their power, which is why Megrez is so much weaker than he used to be. And now that Dina thinks about it, if Megrez can't use his full power anymore, then that means he can't create any more golems like Livia, so if she goes down, then the city will truly be doomed. All of a sudden, the ground begins to shake as a giant monster approaches from the mountainside, and it is none other than Ares. After a brief standoff, Ares and Livia clash, and since Ares' element is fire, Megrez thinks Livia should have the upper hand in a direct confrontation. Livia uses a water spiral attack, forcing Ares to back off initially, but he comes charging back in with a massive fireball shortly after. At first, it looks like the fireball missed Livia altogether, but Ares was never aiming for her in the first place. His real target was Megrez all along, but fortunately, just before the fireball could hit him, Livia managed to step in and extinguish the blast. Megrez then sends Livia out as a tidal wave to push Ares back, but he uses a flame hop skill to jump over her and begins heading straight for Megrez. Megrez puts up a barrier to defend himself, but since he is only half as strong as he used to be, Ares eventually manages to overwhelm him and crack the shield. However, before he could break through, Livia snuck up behind Ares and put him in a chokehold. The soldiers begin cheering Livia on to put an end to this, and Dina asks Lufus how she thinks this is going to end. As far as this battle goes, Lufus says Livia will win, but that doesn't mean she will win the war. A lot of Livia's HP has been drained from tanking all of Ares' attacks, and it's likely that this was Ares' goal from the very beginning. He knew he wouldn't be able to beat Livia in a one-on-one battle, so he planned to whittle her health down with constant attacks and retreat so he can attack again in the future. Lufus is impressed that Ares was able to think logically enough to figure out that Livia can't pursue him once he retreats, so a constant barrage of periodic invasions would guarantee his eventual victory. However, Lufus can't let his plan go any further than this since it would be dangerous if he actually destroyed Livia, so she will have to deal with him herself. She grabs Dina and jumps down onto the battlefield. And just as Ares is about to launch another powerful blast, Lufus kicks him across the mountain range. Everyone is in utter disbelief when they see the terrifying monster sent flying in an instant, and Megrez is left wondering who on earth could possess such power. But even though Lufus is still concealing her identity, as soon as he hears the way she speaks, he kind of figures it out. Lufus doesn't want to confirm or deny anything yet, so she tells Megrez that she will handle Ares on her own, and afterwards, she will be back to have a discussion with him. However, before she leaves, Megrez tells her that there's someone behind the scenes manipulating Ares' thirst for revenge, so she should be careful. The warning is coming from an old friend, so Lufus says she'll keep it in mind, and then she flies off to confront Ares. Once she arrives in front of him, Ares asks who she is, and this comes as a surprise since when she played the game, Ares only ever made sheep noises, so she had no idea that he could actually speak. That aside, since Ares doesn't seem to recognize her, she activates her intimidation skill, and as soon as Ares feels the terrifying pressure coming off her, he is reminded of his master. However, even though she's standing right in front of him, Ares still refuses to believe it's her because he is sure Lufus died a long time ago. Lufus still isn't sure whether she counts as the original since she was technically reincarnated, but regardless, this is definitely the body of Lufus Mathal. She doesn't want to waste time trying to convince Ares with words, so she tells him that if he truly does not believe that it's her, then he is free to come test her strength for himself. And as an added courtesy, she promises not to hurt him too much. Ares hesitates for a moment because the woman in front of him really does look like Lufus, but he convinces himself that she must be a fake because there's no way his master could have returned. He prepares to attack with his full power, and Lufus is starting to get excited since this is the first time she has gotten to go up against a monster that should be strong enough to survive her attacks, so this will be her first real fight. Ares charges at Lufus with full intensity, however. After pushing her back for a few hundred meters, Lufus easily stops his momentum with one hand and tells him that he has indeed grown stronger than he was 200 years ago. Ares continuously attempts to push her back, but Lufus isn't budging one bit, and she even calls him adorable for trying so hard. As a reward for his effort, she says she will give him a hug, and in the next second, Ares is being lifted off the ground by his head. Lufus then throws him straight into the air, but she's still far from done, so she flies off after him. And once she gets above Ares' body, she says she is going to lightly pet him. Lufus then proceeds to punch Ares with the force of a 10-ton truck, sending him crashing down to the ground. But before he lands, she flies beneath him and decides to pet his chin as well, so Ares is sent back into the air. The people watch the spectacle unfold in stunned silence because they've never seen such an overwhelming display of power before. Lufus finally slams Ares into the ground, leaving him looking like Yamcha, but he still isn't done yet. Ares begins to burn with brilliant blue flames, and Lufus assumes this must be his strongest attack, so she tells him to come at her with everything he has. He charges forward with incredible speed, and with a huge smile on her face, Lufus moves forward to intercept him, resulting in a massive explosion that can be seen for miles. By the time the dust settles, we see that Lufus has once again stopped Ares with the palm of her hand, and she then proceeds to finger flick him into the rocks. She asks Ares if he still doubts that she is the real Lufus, but all of a sudden he jumps out of the rubble and changes into his human form to apologize to Lufus for his foolish behavior. Lufus is shocked at first because she knew Ares had a human form, but she doesn't remember designing him to be a femboy. But now that he thinks about it, he recalls a group chat where he and his friends decided to give Ares a femboy design as a joke, and he chose to go along with it. 20 minutes later, Ares finally stops crying and apologizing, so Lufus takes a look at his stat screen, and his level is still the same as it was back when Lufus played the game, but his abilities have improved by quite a bit. And that must have been the result of all of Ares' hard work over the past 200 years. She tells Ares that she is on a mission to reclaim her 12 heavenly stars, and he is her first stop, so she won't be taking no for an answer. Ares is glad that Lufus came to get him first, and he agrees to join her on her mission once more, but he does have a few questions first. Like, who is that blue-haired woman back there? Dina can't believe that Ares really doesn't remember her, so she runs up to him, stares him in the eyes, and reminds him that she has been by Lufus' side the entire time. All of a sudden, Ares recalls fuzzy memories of Dina standing next to Lufus' throne, but considering the fact that she has memory-altering powers, I'm starting to get a little suspicious. From what Ares remembers, Dina literally never moved from that spot, so he assumed she was a piece of furniture, but he's surprised to find out that she can talk. Hearing Ares call her a piece of furniture makes Dina really upset, so she goes over to one side and starts sulking over it. Lufus chuckles a little because she also has no idea who Dina was at first, but she's been of great help since Lufus got here, so she asks Ares not to make fun of her too much. Lufus asks Ares why he was trying to invade the city, so he tells her he only did it because he wanted to avenge Lufus after what the humans did to her. After all, if they hadn't sealed her away, humans would have been defeated by now, and the world would be at peace. Lufus understands Ares' feelings and she appreciates the fact that he wanted to avenge her, but she tells him she has no desire for revenge against humanity. But that aside, she recalls what Megaris had told her about someone manipulating Ares into launching the attacks, so she asks Ares to tell her who filled his head with thoughts of revenge, because she won't stand for someone deceiving her subordinate. Ares nervously tells her that it was one of the demons, and right now, over on the demon continent, that same demon is getting ready to unleash his army to occupy Svel. He's been patiently waiting for Ares to whittle down Levia's health so he could invade, and he has prepared an army of monsters all over level 80 so he's sure that nothing can stop him. Mars orders his army to head out and slaughter every single human in the city of Svel, but all of a sudden, Lufus crashes down right in front of his castle, taking out every single one of Mars' men in the process. Mars has no idea who Lufus is, but he can tell that she is strong, so he decides to go down to confront her. Mars asks Ares why he suddenly decided to stop attacking Svel when he must still hate the humans for what they have done. Ares admits that he still hasn't forgiven humanity for what they did to Lufus, but he now realizes that destroying them won't make him nor Lufus happy. In fact, the only people who would benefit are demons like Mars, and that's the last thing Lufus would want, so Ares swears to stop Mars here and now. Mars isn't really bothered since he already expected this to happen sooner or later, and now that Ares is no longer useful, he plans to eradicate him. Lufus tells Ares to sit this one out since he is still injured from the beating he got earlier, and Mars is surprised that there is still someone so strong on the side of the humans, but it doesn't matter because as one of the 7 demon generals, he is confident that he can defeat her. He begins charging up his fire and ice powers, going into excruciatingly boring detail about how his technique works. He's doing a whole lot of yapping right now, and Lufus eventually gets sick of it, so she punches him square in the face so hard that he is sent blasting off like he's part of Team Rocket. Now that that's been taken care of, there's nothing left for Lufus to do here, but before they leave, she does have a few questions about the 7 demon generals Mars mentioned a minute ago. Ares is about to start explaining it, but before he could say a word, Dina pops out a portal and says she'll handle the explanation instead. She tells Lufus that the 7 demon generals were formed 8 years ago, and they consist of the strongest subordinates serving under the demon lord. Lufus is shocked to learn that Mars was one of the strongest demons since he couldn't have been more than level 300 at most. Dina goes on to explain that humanity wasn't the only side that weakened dramatically over the past 200 years. While it's true that the heroes were all cursed and have since grown incredibly weak, they took out almost all of the demon lord's truly powerful subordinates, so the only ones left who are on Lufus' level are the demon lord himself and his son. Just then, Ares notices that Lufus didn't actually kill any of the monsters when she landed earlier, so he asks her if she plans to leave them alive, and she confirms this. She doesn't think it's right to kill the monsters since they haven't actually done anything wrong, but Dina asks her if she's sure she wants to spare them, since they might end up hurting people if they are left alone. Lufus already thought of a brilliant solution for this, so she uses her power to subjugate all the monsters in the area and bring them under her control. Dina asks her if she intends to bring all the monsters back with them, but Lufus doesn't want to have to take care of all of these monsters, so instead she issues a command and tells all of them to return to their natural habitats and to avoid attacking humans without a good reason. The monsters all begin to wander off, and now they should be able to live out the rest of their lives in peace. So Lufus is happy and her business here is officially done. Afterwards, Lufus heads back to the city of Svel to meet with Megrez and give him an update on the situation. She tells him that she has gotten Ares under control, and she has also defeated the demon general who was behind the whole thing in the first place. Megrez is relieved that it's finally over, but he asks what happened to all the monsters currently under Mars' control. Lufus informs him that she placed all of them under her command, so they won't be a problem, and after hearing of everything Lufus has done, he is certain of her identity. He asks her to come with him for a moment because he would like to discuss things in private, but Safel hesitates for a moment because the anticipation is killing him. The player who used Megrez in the game was a top ranker who played with him all the time, and they were really good friends, so he hopes the Megrez in front of him is the same one as back then. As Megrez returns to the castle, several of the nobles of Svel gather around him and begin talking about how worried they were about him. They all say he needs to be more careful since if the city were to lose him or Livia, there would be no hope of defending against invaders. However, Dina can tell that there's no real sincerity or concern for Megrez behind their words. Megrez rolls past them with a look of resignation on his face, and when Lufus catches up to him, he says he knows she must be appalled by what she just saw. That was meant to be the upper echelon whose job it is to protect the people of the city, but they are only concerned with protecting themselves by sucking up to Megrez. He leads Lufus and the others to his office and he assures her that there is no surveillance equipment here, so she is free to show her full form here. Lufus obliges and spreads her wing, allowing Megrez to confirm that it really is her, but to Lufus' disappointment, the look on Megrez's face is one of sheer terror, so he must not have any memories of being a player. She is disappointed because this means she might truly be alone in this world after all, but Megrez interprets her expression to mean that she is disappointed with his current state. He tells her that a lot can change over 200 years. People can grow stronger or weaker, and in Megrez's case, he has grown far weaker than he used to be. He asks Lufus if she has come back to take revenge on them for sealing her away, but she tells Megrez that the fact that she returned is purely a coincidence. The humans were simply trying to summon a hero and accidentally summoned her instead. Lufus is starting to wonder what's wrong with this world's Megrez, since if he isn't a player, then shouldn't he be opposed to Lufus, at least according to the lore she has heard of so far. Just then, she realizes that Megrez must feel guilty for what happened, since if he and the other heroes hadn't sealed Lufus away, then the demons would have been defeated long ago. Being adored as a hero when he blames himself for the downfall of humanity must be eating away at him, so he's been looking for a way to punish himself for his part in all this. Lufus tells Megrez there is no point in beating himself up over what happened in the past, because the truth of the matter is that he defeated a powerful foe, so he should take pride in that and continue forward on the path he thinks is right. Megrez can't believe Lufus is being so kind to him, so he asks her why she doesn't resent him. She was on the verge of achieving her goal of unification, and they betrayed her. That does sound like something that would be hard to forgive, but as far as Safel is concerned, he holds no hatred or resentment towards Megrez because the battle only took place in the game, so he never got to experience it. He has no idea how Lufus felt about it at the time, but he wants to give an appropriate response, so she tells Megrez that if he and the others chose to rise up against her rule, then it was her own fault for being an inadequate ruler. Megrez tries to argue that he still deserves to pay for what he did, but then he looks up and sees Lufus' face of genuine forgiveness as she tells him he needs to stop blaming himself. Regardless of what happened, he is the hero of this country, so he needs to stand proud. Megrez gets her point, but she could have phrased it better since considering the wheelchair, he won't be doing much standing. Megrez has a lore flashback to the old days when Lufus and Olith were still best friends, and he's reminded of how much fun he used to have back then, so he promises to take Lufus' advice. Afterwards, Lufus uses her magic to restore Livia's lost HP, and Megrez thanks her for the help since in his current state, he wouldn't have been able to do that on his own. Livia then returns to the water, and Lufus apologizes for the trouble Ares caused, but Ares still has a grudge against Megrez, so he says he won't apologize. Megrez asks Lufus what she plans to do now, so she tells him she will continue traveling the continent until she has reclaimed all her 12 stars. And Dina tells Lufus that the next one up on the list is Libra, the guard of the Black-Winged Grave. Lufus asks what the Grave of the Black-Winged is, so Dina explains that after she was sealed, all the people who looked up to her worked together to build the world's largest structure as a memorial to Lufus. And at the very top, all of Lufus' old treasures and loot have been stored, with Libra acting as a guard to protect it from grave robbers. Lufus asks why people would be dumb enough to risk fighting Libra just to rob a grave, So Megrez informs her that people's levels aren't the only thing that has declined. Weapons have also gotten much worse. Many of the legendary weapons that used to exist were lost in the battle against the Demon Lord, so the only ones left are those that sit in Lufa's grave. Humanity has desperately been trying to get its hands on those weapons to help in the fight against the demon army, but thanks to Libra, all attempts have ended in brutal failure. Lufa understands how frustrating it must have been for Megrez, but unlike Ares, it doesn't seem like Libra is actually doing anything wrong. She's just expressing her loyalty by guarding the grave of her master, and Megrez sees Lufa's point, but he does have a request he'd like to make. After Lufa has retrieved Libra and reclaimed her treasures, he asks her to please leave behind anything she doesn't intend to use, since it would be a huge help to him. Lufa says she's fine with that, so she and the others prepare to leave, but before they go, Megrez says he has something to give her. He may be weakened, but he still has a fair bit of powerful magic. So he uses a spell to hide Lufa's wings so she doesn't have to keep covering them with her cloak all the time to keep her identity secret. He also gets her a new outfit, and Lufa is really grateful since this is much easier to move around in. On their way out, Lufa goes to find Gauntz outside the city, and he is a bit confused at first because he doesn't understand why such a pretty lady would be talking to him. But then Lufa takes off her glasses to show him that she's the person he helped earlier today. Gauntz is stunned because he had no idea she was this beautiful this entire time. She tells him she came to say goodbye and to thank him for all his help, so Gauntz wishes her safe travels on her journey, but before she leaves, he has one final question. He's about to ask her if she is the same Lufa from the legends, but he suddenly stops himself and tells her to forget he said anything because there's no way that could be the case. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Mars has just crash-landed in a forest, and while he was flying through the air, he came to the realization that the only person capable of hitting him so hard would be Lufa's Mafal, but if she's really back, then all his plans will go to waste. Just then, a woman walks up to Mars and she tells him that his role is over, so it's time for him to disappear like the pathetic puppet he is. With a snap of her fingers, Mars is erased from existence. And the one responsible is this woman, who looks an awful lot like Lufa's. The next stop for Lufa's is to pick up Libra, but the grave is over 500 kilometers away, so Dina asks Lufa's to create a golem to give them a ride there. That would be possible, but Lufa's says it would be quicker for Dina to just teleport them there since she has teleportation magic at her disposal. Dina sighs and tells Lufa that teleportation magic is primarily for personal use, and while it is possible for her to transport other people, she needs to have their consent, and if there's even a hint of unconscious refusal, the teleportation magic can have all sorts of unintended effects, so she'd rather avoid risking it. Plus, she was looking forward to having a pleasant road trip, so she asks Lufa to include a bath and a place to sleep when she's making the golem so they won't have to come outdoors at night. Lufa has never heard of a golem like that before, but Ares seems really excited about it, so she agrees to try making one. She waves her hand and begins the golem forming process, eventually creating an RV, and then she uses a few logs from the forest to create some furniture. Dina is happy that they will have comfortable beds for the trip, but she asks Lufa if she could make some soft bedding for them as well. Lufa looks around for some materials to use for the covers, but then she remembers that Ares is a sheep, and I'm sure you know what happened next. Anyway, the RV is finally complete, but Dina reminds Lufa that she hasn't given it a name yet, so Lufa thinks for a moment and decides to call it Tanaka. It even comes with its own promotional ad for some reason. After traveling for some time, it gets dark, so Dina suggests they should stop and set up camp for the night, to which Lufa agrees. However, as soon as they step outside, Dina smells something nearby, so she goes to investigate and discovers a natural warm spring behind some bushes. She gets really excited because she has been dying to take a bath, but Lufa doesn't see what all the fuss is about since the RV already comes with a bath built in. But Dina says experiencing a natural warm spring is way better. She grabs Ares' hand and starts leading him to the spring so they can get in right away, but then he reminds her that despite appearances, he is still a guy, so he will wait over there until it's his turn. Hearing him say that reminds Lufa that despite appearances, she is still mentally a guy as well, and the idea of bathing with Dina is probably going to be uncomfortable, but she can't exactly explain the real situation to her, so she decides to just stand by some trees and face away until Dina has gotten undressed and submerged herself in the water. Once Dina is in the water, she lets out a huge sigh because there's nothing better than soaking in an open-air spring after a long day of travel. She asks Lufa to get in as well, and Lufa briefly considers making an excuse to avoid it, but there's no point, so she does as Dina requested and undresses so she can get in the bath. However, before she could step in, Dina reminds Lufa that it is poor etiquette to get in the water without tying up your hair since it would leave loose hair strands all over the place, and then no one else would want to use it. Lufa agrees that she should probably tie her hair up, so Dina offers to do it for her and prepares to get out to help. However, she isn't wearing a towel, and Lufa doesn't think it'd be right to look at Dina's body, so she says Dina should stay where she is and she'll meet her there. After Lufus gets in the water, Dina helps tie her hair up to prevent any loose strands from getting in the water. However, there's not much they can do about Lufus' feathers since they tend to molt when placed in hot water. Lufus apologizes for the stray feathers, but Dina says it's nothing to worry about, and Lufus barely ever gets a chance to spread her wings like this anyway, so she should enjoy the experience while it lasts. As the two of them soak side by side, Safel begins staring at Dina's body really intensely, and it makes him come to a troubling realization. In his past life, Safel wasn't a complete degenerate, but he was still a certified gooner. However, now, even though he's staring right at Dina's body, he feels absolutely nothing. Dina notices that Lufus seems a little zoned out, but before she can ask why, she spots a group of adaptive frogs on a rock over there, so she gets Lufus' attention and tells her to take a look. Lufus doesn't understand what's so special about a bunch of frogs, so Dina explains that these ones have a special property. The green ones are male, and the pink ones are female. And when there are more males than females, the male frogs all fight to see who earns the right to give Froggy back shots. Then, after a winner has been decided, the two remaining male frogs then play rock, paper, scissors, and whoever loses turns into a female frog and has to accept back shots from the other. Safel briefly wonders whether turning into Lufus has changed his preferences as well, but there's no way he's ever letting himself take back shots, so he immediately dismisses the thought. Dina notices that Lufus seems a bit stressed, so she asks her what's wrong, but Lufus says it's nothing and suggests they should get out of the spring now. A few minutes later, they both return to the RV and tell Aries that he's free to use the warm spring now, so he comes out in his towel and ties his head up before heading out for a soak. The next day, the group arrives at Lufus' grave and she is shocked by how massive it is, but also by the fact that there's a whole city around it for some reason. Dina explains that since so many adventurers kept trying to loot the grave to get some of Lufus' valuables, merchants began gathering here in hopes of making a profit by selling them equipment, and from there, more and more people kept showing up until a whole village was formed, and now Lufus' grave is pretty much a tourist site. Lufus finds it interesting that all this happened in just 200 years, and she isn't really bothered by the fact that people turned this into a tourist attraction, but Aries, on the other hand, is absolutely furious because he can't believe people would dare to disrespect Lufus in such a manner. He says he is prepared to lay waste to this place immediately, but Lufus tells him to simmer down because she doesn't want anyone to die for no reason. For now, she suggests they should head into the grave immediately, but as they are approaching the entrance, they end up running into a group of adventurers who look like they are pretty worried. Apparently, a reconnaissance squad was sent into the grave 2 months ago to map out a new area, but they haven't returned for their scheduled check-in, so they are starting to worry that something might have happened to them. Hearing this makes Lufus even more eager to get in and find Libra as soon as possible, because she doesn't want anyone else to risk their lives in this place. The adventurers notice Lufus heading inside and warn her that she really shouldn't head inside right now. Whatever is going on in there, the fact that their reconnaissance team made up of 50 of the strongest adventurers in the nation went missing means a party of 3 would stand no chance in there. Lufus thanks them for their concern, but she assures them that she is more than capable of handling whatever is inside. Lufus and the others then walk into the dungeon, but as they make their way through the tunnels, Aries suddenly stops because he senses something approaching. Soon after, one of the golems Lufus mass-produced for the battle 200 years ago walks out of the darkness, and Dina explains that there were apparently a lot left over after Lufus was sealed away, so they have been wandering the grave site ever since and take out any intruders they find. However, she says there's no need to worry since she doesn't sense any hostile intention from the golem. These kinds of golems were made to be able to distinguish friend from foe, and it clearly still recognizes Lufus and Aries, so they have nothing to fear. But when it comes to Dina, on the other hand, the golem immediately starts attacking her. Aries and Lufus assume the golem must not remember Dina since neither of them remembered her at first either, but Lufus doesn't want to let Dina get squished, so she decides to destroy the golem. However, before she could do so, the party of adventurers from earlier shows up, and they jump in to save her. Their party name is Hawkeye, and they followed Lufus and the others in here because they were worried that they might get hurt. They are pretty well coordinated with their attacks, so they are doing well keeping it busy, but since the golem is level 150 and their levels are barely pushing 50 at all, they aren't able to do much damage to it. If the golem even managed to land a single blow on them, they'd be dead instantly, and Lufus doesn't want to let that happen, so she asks Aries to go help them out. He happily agrees to do so and runs past adventurers before punching the golem with a flaming fist that sends it flying backwards. That was enough to take it out for good, so once the dust settles, the leader Jan goes up to Aries and excitedly asks him how he managed to perform an attack like that. Aries gets a little flustered because Jan way too close, so Lufus gets in between them and tells Jan to tone it down a bit. Jan apologizes for getting too close and for he and his party needing to be saved even though they came here trying to save Lufus. Jan introduces himself as a warrior, Nick introduces himself as a light warrior, and Richard introduces himself as a heavy warrior. Lufus can't believe how terrible the balance is on their team because everyone on the team is a warrior aside from Shu, who happens to be an archer. Anyway, since they are doing introductions, she introduces herself as a high-level ranger class adventurer, but when it's Dina and Ares' turn, they have no idea what to say, so they also declare that they are rangers, and Jan shows a look of concern because to him, Luffy's party looks way more unbalanced than his does. Jan offers to accompany Luffy's party to provide support, and Luffy is about to turn him down, but before she could say anything, Dina chimes in and says she'd love to have the extra help. Jan and the others are glad to hear it, so they start walking down the hallway, and with a cherry face, Dina explains to Luffy that they use the adventurers to make things easier for themselves, at least until one of them falls into a trap and dies or something, and hearing Dina say it with a smile on her face makes Luffy realize that she's a bit of a psychopath. However, there's no real harm in letting the party stick around since they seem like nice people, so Luffy decides to just support them as much as possible without drawing too much suspicion, at least until they get to the top and find Libra. Meanwhile, at the top of the pyramid, the Reconnaissance party that went missing months ago has finally made it up the long staircase, and they swear to themselves that no matter what, they will obtain the treasury of weapons for the sake of humanity and their fallen comrades. However, as they arrive at the top floor, they are confronted by Libra, and she immediately orders them to leave this room within 10 seconds, otherwise she will eliminate them. The adventurers try reasoning with Libra because they really need those weapons to fight the demons, but she couldn't care less about their reason, and once the countdown reaches 0, she activates the Brachium program, sealing the adventurers in a bubble with her so they can be killed. Meanwhile, as for Hawkeye, Luffy is starting to regret letting them come along because these guys are absolute fodder, and they aren't even smart enough to realize how weak they are. Every time they run into a golem, they get their asses handed to them, and then Luffy is forced to order the golem to stand down so the adventurers don't end up dead. But they genuinely believe they are the ones who beat the golems, and Luffy is worried she might be giving them false confidence. The group eventually comes up to the final Guardian Golem, and this one is a lot tougher than the others, coming in at a high level 600, so Luffy knows the adventurers would get folded the second they stepped into range of that thing, so she tells them all to stand back while she walks ahead to deal with it. The adventurers try telling her it's too dangerous to fight something like that on her own, but Dina tells them they don't need to worry because Luffy has a plan, so they all agree to stand down. She walks up to the golem, and the first thing she does is ask if it recognizes her. The golem definitely seems to react to Luffy's face, but it still ends up attacking her anyway, so she is forced to defend herself and slices it down the middle in one go. She then begins walking over to the stairs, but as she is leaving, the golem calls out her name and says welcome home. Luffy thanks it for working hard to protect this place for the past 200 years, but its assignment is now over, so it can finally rest, and the golem seems glad to be relieved of its duty, so it powers down for good. After that, she starts heading up the stairs to confront Libra, but the adventurers tell her to stop because they think it's way too risky to face Libra on her own, so they want to go with her. However, Luffy is done babysitting them, so she makes it clear that they'd die almost instantly if Libra chose to attack them, so they wouldn't stand a chance of leaving here alive. The adventurers can't argue with that, but before Luffy leaves, they ask her who she really is. They are well aware that they aren't the brightest bunch, but it doesn't take a genius to figure out that the only reason they've made it this far is because Luffy kept stepping in to save them. And there's also the fact that she was able to destroy one of the golems with a single strike, so there's no way she's really just a ranger. Luffy pauses for a moment, wondering what to say, but then she tells them that she does not intend to answer their questions and heads up without another word. Dina and Ares tell Luffy they will wait down here for her to return since neither of them can handle Libra's Brachium either, so she will be handling this alone. As Luffy is climbing the stairs, she wonders to herself why she felt genuine sadness when she took out that golem earlier. Even if it was one of Luffy's creations, while it may make sense for the Luffy's character to care about it, to Safel it was nothing but a bunch of pixels on a screen, so he should have no emotional attachment to it. He realizes there must be something wrong with his mind to be making him feel this way, but there's no time to worry about that right now because first he needs to take care of Libra. Luffy eventually makes it up the top floor, and there she finds Libra waiting to intercept her as the latest intruder. Libra orders Luffy to leave within 10 seconds or face hostile actions, but instead she just takes off her glasses and spreads her wings to reveal her identity. After getting a good look at Luffy, Libra stops the countdown and begins trying to process what she is seeing because she can't believe Luffy is really back. She confirms that the person standing in front of her looks exactly like Luffy and is even a 99% genetic match for Luffy, but she still finds it hard to accept because it should be statistically impossible for Luffy to have survived the battle against the heroes. She begins to short-circuit from the logical inconsistency, and Lufus tries telling her not to think about it too much for the sake of her processors, but Libra is already pretty damaged, so Lufus says she will be approaching to administer repairs now. Upon hearing this, Libra's defense protocol kicks in, and since she hasn't acknowledged Lufus as her master yet, she tells Lufus that if she takes one more step, she will be forced to use force against her. However, Lufus doesn't stop moving as she asks Libra what she's going to do about it. Libra interprets Lufus' sudden movements as hostile action, so her defense system kicks in, activating her brachium and creating a vast airspace for her to fight in. Lufus is caught off guard at first by the sudden change of environment, but when Libra begins firing at her, she snaps out of it. Lufus performs evasive maneuvers to dodge all of Libra's gunfire and missiles, but man, Libra is not making it easy. Lufus eventually finds an opening to strike Libra and interrupt her attack animation, so she starts chasing after her instead. Libra tries to shake Lufus off by using more gunfire, but she counters it by using her wings to blow the bullets back at her, disabling her gun. Libra then attempts to use a wide array of other attacks, but nothing she does comes anywhere close to defeating Lufus, so she eventually disables the domain and activates a different one. Lufus recognizes this as Libra's ultimate attack, a domain expansion that ignores all defensive skills and has a sure hit effect that deals 99,000 damage. The fact that she has been caught in the attack's range should be concerning, but to be honest, Lufus is actually excited because this will be the first bit of significant damage she has taken since she came to this world. As Libra unleashes the violent wave of energy, Lufus feels the pain hit her like a dump truck, but she has more than enough HP to tank the damage, so she continues pushing forward until she is eventually right in front of Libra. Libra then attempts to blast Lufus in the face with a laser, but she ducks out of the way, and before Libra could strike with her sword arm, Lufus grabs it to hold her in place while she casts All Repair. This fixes all the damage Libra has suffered during her years of guarding this grave, and Lufus apologizes for taking so long to come back. With Libra's logic units back in working order, she is able to confirm that the person in front of her is indeed her master, so there is no longer a need for her to guard this grave, and she powers down for a much-needed nap. Lufus is glad that she managed to recover Libra without too much of a hassle, but now she wonders how she is going to explain this to the adventurers without revealing her true identity. She heads back down the stairs and pops her head around the corner to see how things are going, but to her surprise, she only sees Dina and Ares waiting for her. She's confused and asks what happened to the adventurers, so Dina explains that she just implanted some false memories in their heads with her mind manipulation to make them think they are the ones who defeated Libra. Lufus had forgotten that Dina mentioned that she had mind manipulation powers, and now that she has seen it in action, it looks absolutely terrifying. Dina explains that she made them think Libra was severely injured before they arrived, so they were able to overwhelm her and claim victory. This way, no one will ask too many questions, but Lufus thinks this is a little too convenient, so she asks Dina if she had this plan from the moment she agreed to let them join the mission. Dina doesn't deny it, and with a sly smile, she says that was the only reason she was willing to tolerate such hindrances. Lufus gets creeped out by how heartless Dina can be, but she's glad they aren't enemies because she'd be terrifying to deal with. Anyway, since things down here are under control, Dina suggests they should head up to the treasure room and gather all the things they will need. Once they arrive in the vault, they are all amazed by all the shiny treasures in the room, especially Lufus. She can hardly sit still, and she doesn't understand why, but Dina points out that Lufus always loved shiny stuff. That's why she hoarded so much treasure in the first place, and she tends to go a little crazy in situations like these, so Dina asks Ares to help her pick out the useful items while Lufus is distracted by all the gold. Lufus tries to argue that she is perfectly capable of controlling herself around gold, but she literally already has her hands full with a bunch of gold, so she can't be trusted to pick out the important stuff. A little while later, Dina and Ares are done gathering all the items they need, and the rest of the stuff here is either a bunch of old weapons or useless gold, so leaving it behind shouldn't be a problem. But before they leave, Dina asks Lufus if she could gather the golems in the area so they can be teleported back to base, and Lufus says she will be happy to help, but then she realizes that Dina meant all of the golems, so she is forced to spend the next few hours roaming this giant grave just to make sure she actually got them all. Afterwards, Dina teleports all the golems away, and since there's nothing left for them to do here, she suggests they should get going. Lufus asks if it's really alright for them to leave the adventurers here in their current state, but Dina assures her that it won't be a problem, and a few minutes after Lufus' group has left, the adventurers wake up, fully convinced that they were the ones who cleared the grave and defeated all the golems. Meanwhile, out in the forest, Lufus and the others have made it back to the RV, but before they get back on the road, Dina fixes up Libra's clothes and sets her down on a tree stump so Lufus can talk to her. Lufus walks over to Libra and gives the instruction to power on, so she wakes up, and the first thing she does is greet Ares and the unfamiliar lady beside him. She then apologizes to Lufus for all the trouble she has caused, but before Lufus could respond, Dina says she can't believe Libra doesn't recognize her. Lufus chuckles and tells Libra that Dina is her advisor, and Libra is shocked to hear this because her memory banks hold no data on Dina whatsoever. Dina gets up close to Libra's face and tries to get her to remember her, but Libra is still certain that she has never seen Dina before. However, after running a thorough memory check, Libra did find a few damaged memory files that may contain information about Dina, but she has no way to check those for the time being. Therefore, she decides to just take Lufus' word for it and acknowledges Dina's position as an advisor, at least temporarily. It's hard for Lufus to tell what Libra is thinking since she never really shows much expression, but she has no reason to question Libra's loyalty, so she tells her they are on a journey to reclaim all 12 heavenly stars, and she wants to know if Libra would like to serve her once more. Libra says nothing would make her happier, and she is ready to devote every moment of her life to Lufus' goal. Now that Libra has officially rejoined Lufus' team, she asks her if she knows anything about the locations of the other heavenly stars. Libra apologizes and says she has no useful information because she was stationed in the grave the entire time and was completely cut off from the rest of the world. In that case, Lufus turns to Dina and asks if she knows anything, and Dina happily explains that roughly 2,000 kilometers from here, there is a small village at the base of a mountain where Parthenos secretly lives. Lufus is surprised to learn that Parthenos chose to live in a village, so Dina explains that the village was actually created by Parthenos, and she erected a powerful barrier to protect the defenseless monsters and plants from the rest of the world. Lufus is relieved that Parthenos didn't go causing trouble for people, but then Dina mentions that the mountain where the village was built used to be Lufus' homeland, and Parthenos actually drove out all of the Heaven Wing that lived there, creating an uninhabitable zone to keep them out, and Lufus is disappointed again. On the ride back home, Lufus was having a flashback to her time as Sappho, but all of a sudden she is woken up by Dina placing a hand on her shoulder. Dina asks her what happened, so Lufus explains that she was just having a dream that seemed rather important, but for some reason she can't remember what it was about. She decides to just focus on her current mission, so she asks Dina how much longer it will be before they get to their destination. They've been driving for a while now, so it shouldn't take much longer, but Ares has a few questions. Like if Parthenos drove all the other Heaven Winged out of Vanaheim, then where did they go? Dina explains that the Heaven Winged are currently living in Galahorn, which was founded by one of the 7 heroes, Merak, the Sky King. Lufus gets the feeling that she won't get along well with the rest of the Heaven Winged given her character backstory. But if Merak is there, she needs to check if he remembers something from the time they played the game together. By nightfall, the group arrives outside the city of Galahorn, and since all the buildings were constructed around the cliff face, walking around it is bound to be a nightmare. Ares wonders why it is so plainly segregated into black and white sides, so Dina explains that the nation is suffering some civil turmoil and has split itself into 2 factions. Lufus asks what she means by that, so Dina explains that the Heaven Winged who have wings of pure white think they are better than everyone else, and it caused a huge civil uproar among the rest of the people. Lufus asks why Merak hasn't calmed things down already, so Dina explains that Merak is trying to maintain neutrality to stop the fighting on both sides, but he hasn't been able to control them. Ares recalls that the persecution of the Dark Winged was prohibited during Lufus' reign, which Lufus finds odd since she doesn't have any memories of issuing such an order. Dina goes on to explain that once Lufus was gone, the White Winged used the opportunity to claim superiority over the Dark Winged, and the Dark Winged fought back, which is why we have been fighting for the past 200 years. Lufus feels like this was kind of her fault, so she plans to do something about it, but since the average lifespan of a Heaven Winged is over 1,000 years, many of them must have personally met Lufus 200 years ago, so they are bound to recognize her face if she goes into town like this. She decides to cover her face with her cloak to make sure no one recognizes her. When it's finally time to climb up the stairs, they all realize it's going to be a real hassle getting up there since the city was built for people who can fly. Ares really isn't looking forward to all the walking he's going to have to do, but Libra tells him there's no need to worry because she has the perfect solution in mind. She activates her jet mode, and before Lufus can make any objections, she grabs everyone before flying up to the dark side of the city. They all make it there safe and sound, but the sound of a jet engine this late at night woke all the Dark Winged in the neighborhood up, so they all come out to see what the ruckus is about. Lufus yells at Libra for making so much noise this late at night, but Libra doesn't actually care about the feelings of people aside from Lufus, so she sees no problem with what she did. The crowd is still really confused, so Dina introduces herself as a free trader and tells everyone that these are her companions. Lufus then apologizes for the disturbance they caused, and she assures the residents that this won't happen again. The people here seem pretty nice, and one of them happens to own an inn, so he invites Lufus and the others to spend the night if they are still looking for a place to stay. Lufus decides to take him up on his offer since Ares seems to be quite tired, and later that night, she is laying in bed when she has a terrible nightmare. It was a flashback into Lufus' backstory where she was being mistreated by her father. Apparently, a bunch of neighborhood kids had been picking on her, but nothing was done about it until she fought back. Now her father was beating the shit out of her and told her to never leave this room again because she was a disgrace to his entire bloodline, all because she was born with dark wings. Her father then immediately went back inside to laugh with all his rich white-winged friends while his daughter was left alone in the dark shed with no food to eat. She hated how unfair her life was, but there was at least one person who still cared for Lufus. Later that night, Lufus' mother snuck out to the shed to check on Lufus and bring her some food. Even if it's not much, Lufus was really grateful to at least have something to eat, and her mother felt terrible about the conditions Lufus was being forced to live in, but there was nothing she could do about it, especially with how sickly she had become. Lufus hugged her mother, told her everything was going to be alright, and warned her that if she didn't get back inside soon, her father was going to notice. Lufus offered to walk her back inside to make sure she got there safely, but on the way she encountered her father, who was appalled that his wife had let Lufus out of the shed. He orders her to leave Lufus and come over to him at once, but Lufus knows that that just means he intends to punish her mother, so she stands in front to protect her. However, at this point, Lufus was still too weak to protect anything, so he punched her to the ground and then dragged his wife away, leaving her in the cold rain to wonder why she is always treated this way just because her wings are a different color. She came to the realization that the world is an unfair place, and the goddess of creation wasn't coming to save her anytime soon, so she was going to have to save herself. She ran away from home and vowed that no matter what it takes, she would become stronger and put an end to all the suffering in this miserable world. Just then, Lufus jolts awake and Libra comes to her side to see if she is alright since her heart rate seems to have spiked. Lufus tells her she just had a dream of the past, but it is nothing to be concerned about, so Libra takes her word for it and goes back into sleep mode. However, while she may have said there was no need to be worried, Sappho is actually really worried because he doesn't remember writing that kind of backstory when he created Lufus' character. This, along with the random memories and emotions that have been flowing into him since he arrived, must have been the memories of the original Lufus, and that means this world has real events that exist outside what he created in the game. But if that's the case, then with his soul occupying Lufus' body, he wonders what happened to the soul of the real Lufus. Meanwhile, over in the Demon Lord's castle, the 7 demon luminaries are gathered for a meeting, but they notice that Mars is missing, so they all assume he must have died. They aren't too surprised by it since he was the weakest of the luminaries after all, but they wonder whether Megrez was the one who took him down, or if Ares turned on him. It would be really embarrassing if Mars somehow lost to Ares, but all of a sudden, the luminary Venus walks in and tells everyone that she knows what happened to Mars. Everyone turns to look at her, and they all ask what she's been up to lately because none of them have seen her for a while, so she tells them she's been following the person who killed Mars. They are all surprised to hear this and ask Venus if she knows who the person is, but she says she couldn't get too close without risking her life. But while she didn't get a good look at the person's face, she does recall that they had beautiful black wings. As soon as the other luminaries hear this, the first person they think of is Lufus, but it shouldn't be possible for her to be around since they all know for a fact that she was killed by those human heroes 2 centuries ago. They don't think Venus is lying, but if Lufus really is back, then demonkind is in real danger because even the Demon Lord was scared of facing her alone. The luminaries ask Venus if she knows where Lufus currently is, so she informs them that she recalls seeing Lufus heading towards Gjallarhorn. The luminaries think this is a convenient opportunity since they were planning to head to Gjallarhorn anyway, so the leader assigns Venus and Jupiter to go there and keep an eye on Lufus. The next morning, Lufus and the others head out into town to discuss their plan. Merak is still the ruling king here, but with all the internal strife, getting an audience with him is going to be difficult, so for now, Lufus suggests they should just roam about the capital and gather as much information as they can. Lufus mainly wants to find out what the living conditions of the Dark Winged look like, so she says she will be staying here, and in that case, Dina volunteers to investigate the White Winged side of the city, and Libra takes off to do her own independent investigation. Ares also plans to go gather some information, but before he leaves, there's something he needs to tell Lufus. He says it's about one of the 12 heavenly stars, Agacaros the goat, and a long time ago, he apparently invited Ares to join the demon army, so it is likely that he has allied himself with them. Lufus thanks Ares for telling her, and she says she will go retrieve Agacaros next on the list, but for now, she's going to take a look around the city. She spends the next few hours strolling through the city, and things honestly don't seem that bad around here. But then she comes across a giant black temple. She is curious as to why the people would build a black temple for the goddess of creation, but as she steps inside, she finds a giant statue of herself. Just then, the temple's caretaker approaches, and he can see how confused she is, so he asks if she's new in town. Lufus tells him she's just surprised that the people here would build a statue in honor of the world's biggest tyrant. The caretaker is a little offended that someone would refer to Lufus as a tyrant, but he does understand why some people think that. The rest of the world may see history differently, but to the Dark-Winged, Lufus was and always will be their savior. Lufus is intrigued, so she asks him to explain more about it, and he goes on to talk about how dark-winged beings like himself used to face constant discrimination from those with white wings, and they were forced to live miserable lives in places that amounted to slums. They spent every day living in fear and lurking in the shadows, but Lufus was different. While the rest of them were cowering in fear, she used her strength to prove that she was worthy of respect and recognition. Then she conquered the Heaven-Winged nation and prohibited discrimination altogether, allowing the Dark-Winged to live with dignity for the first time in their lives. That's why they all worship her to this day. Lufus asks if they have forgotten that it was Parthinos, one of Lufus's subordinates, who drove them out of their homeland. And the man does recall that event, but he believes it was the punishment he and the other Heaven-Winged deserved for committing the grave sin of betraying Lufus after everything she had done for them. In fact, they see it as mercy from Parthinos that they weren't all killed on the spot, but if that's how the Dark-Winged feel, Lufus asks what they think of their king Merak. As soon as she mentions Merak's name, the caretaker's face soars because he believes Merak to be one of the worst kinds of fools, a man who calls himself a hero despite the terrible things he has done. Elsewhere in the city, Dina looks like she's waiting for someone, and she is getting frustrated because he was supposed to show up a while ago. Meanwhile, at the same time, Libra is up in the air scanning the facial expressions to see if any of the citizens here have recognized Lufus yet, but there doesn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary. She then spots Dana, who, judging by her posture, looks like she's waiting for someone to show up, and further down the street, Libra spots a person heading straight for Dina, but upon further inspection of the man's strange appearance, she determines that this must be a demon in disguise, so she flies down to intercept him. Libra lands in front of the demon and tells him to back away immediately or face hostile action, and at first he tries to play it off like he's a regular citizen. But when Libra tells him she has already seen through his disguise, he drops the act and attacks, so Libra activates her defense protocols. While that's happening, Ares is sitting at the edge of the city, and because this place was founded by one of the heroes who betrayed Lufus, Ares would love to burn it all to the ground, but he knows Lufus wouldn't want that, so he decides to take a walk to cool off. However, after a while, he notices that there's no one else around, and a moment later, a barrier is formed and he is confronted by Awakens. Meanwhile, Merak is in his castle, having a meeting with the other Light-Winged, and he looks so exhausted because the Light-Winged have been yelling at him to use his power to get rid of the Dark-Winged. Merak initially founded Galahorn to give the Dark-Winged a place to go where they wouldn't be looked down upon by the Light-Winged, but then Parthinos kicked the Light-Winged out of Vanaheim, and now they didn't have anywhere to go, which is why he reluctantly welcomed them into this nation. But even though this wasn't their land to begin with, they kept insisting on receiving special privileges and persecuting the Dark-Winged. He has tried handling this diplomatically, but no matter how many times he tries to convince them to just coexist with the Dark-Winged, the White-Winged keep trying to get him to kick them out. Merak has no idea how to solve this problem, and he doesn't think he is fit to be the king of this nation because he is nowhere near as good a ruler as Lufus was. He was born with everything he needed for success practically handed to him, but Lufus had to fight and struggle to become such a great person, so compared to her, he thinks of himself as an incompetent fool. Meanwhile, Lufus is outside the White-Winged section, and she knows that the quickest way to solve the conflict is to convince Merak to take action, but she has no idea how she's going to get in contact with him. Elsewhere in the nation, Libra is engaged in battle against Jupiter, so she transforms her arm into a cannon and launches a blast at him. But before he'd be hit, Jupiter jumps out of the way. Libra tries shooting him with her gun after that, but he protects himself with a shield of wind and then goes in for a counterattack, slicing clean through Libra's gun. After witnessing Jupiter's fighting style, Libra comes to the conclusion that he must be an element user since he is able to manipulate the wind at will and slice clean through metal, and Jupiter confirms it, but knowing his ability won't make much of a difference. At the same time, Awakens is still trying to convince Ares to join the demon army with him so they can destroy the heroes, but Ares turns him down. He understands that Awakens is doing this to get revenge for Lufus, but he tells him that there's no need to continue on that path because Lufus has returned. As soon as Awakens hears that Lufus is back, he freezes because he can hardly believe it, but it would make sense that Lufus was the one who defeated Mars, so it's not impossible. Ares tells Awakens that it's time for him to come back to Lufus' side and serve her once more, but while Awakens still remains loyal to Lufus, he says he can't return to her side yet, because if he doesn't eliminate her enemies first, then they will eventually turn on her once more. That's why Awakens' new goal is to destroy Merak's nation along with the rest of the heroes. And once he's done with that, he's going to destroy the demons as well and offer them up as a sacrifice to Lufus. Ares tries telling him he doesn't need to do all that, but Agokuros is too excited to listen, so he teleports away to begin his plan. After he's gone, Ares thinks about the situation for a second, and honestly, he hates the heroes just as much as Agokuros does, so there's no reason for him to want to stop their destruction. But he knows Luphas wouldn't approve of such action, so he wonders whether he should tell her or not. After all, the Light District of the nation is full of scumbags who persecuted Luphas for the color of her wings, so she would be better off if those people perish anyway. He eventually decides to wait and see how people of the Light District act so he can make his decision, and if they turn out to be the same racist jerks who caused Luphas so much suffering, he will let them face destruction. Meanwhile, in the streets of the Lightwing District, the guy Digna is waiting for still hasn't shown up, and she's starting to get impatient, so she starts looking around, and that's when she notices a man nearby who looks really suspicious. She figures this might be a good way to gather some intel, so she follows him down the street until he eventually enters a dark alley. It turns out that he's one of the Light-Winged who were trying to convince Merak to get rid of the Dark-Winged, and he tells his comrades that Merak refuses to side with them, so they are going to have to take matters into their own hands and get rid of those filthy Dark-Winged, even if it means getting their hands dirty. He also informs everyone that he was told the Dark-Winged are preparing for war, and when they ask how he knows this, he tells them a man named Jupiter told him, and he would never lie to them, so it must be true. The others ask where Jupiter is now, but the man says he doesn't know because Jupiter was supposed to meet with him today, but he apparently never showed up. And the man thinks it has something to do with those wingless people who showed up recently. Dina has been eavesdropping this entire time, and from what she heard, it sounds like this nation is on the verge of a civil war, and she's willing to bet that the Jupiter they referred to is the one fanning the flames. She has no idea why he chose to skip meeting with the Lightwing today, but at least now she has some good intel to share with Luphas. Back with Libra, she is still engaged in battle against Jupiter, and no matter how much wind he uses, he isn't able to budge Libra's solid frame whatsoever. The only reason he has been holding out so far is because he is fast enough to dodge all of Libra's shots, but she's been analyzing his attack pattern this entire time, and once she's done with her calculations, it's going to be a lot harder for him to dodge, so he needs to think of something quickly. He realizes there's no way he can beat Libra right now, so he creates a massive gust of wind to kick up dust and obscure her vision so he can escape. Libra tries to stop him by blowing the dust away, but by then it was already too late, and Jupiter was long gone. Later that day, everyone meets back up to discuss what they've learnt, and Dina informs Luphas that the Lightwinged are currently preparing themselves for war against the Dark-Winged, although they were likely incited into doing so by a man named Jupiter. Libra then speaks up to inform Luphas that she engaged in battle with one of the 7 demon luminaries whose name was Jupiter, but despite her best efforts, he managed to get away. Luphas is surprised to hear that there was a demon trying to destroy this city when it would likely fall apart on its own, but since Jupiter is likely to come back, Libra requests that Luphas alchemize some homing bullets and missiles for her since she's currently running low on ammo. Luphas agrees to make some ammunition later, but before that, she turns to Ares and asks him if anything happened on his end. Ares still hasn't decided whether he should let the Heaven Wing be destroyed or not, so for now he lies and tells Luphas that nothing noteworthy happened to him. Luphas takes his word for it, so she then proceeds to tell everyone what she observed in the Dark District. The people there have endless hatred for those from the Light District, and it's very likely that a civil war will break out soon, but in other news, the Dark Wing seems to have erected a statue of Luphas in their temple and worship her. After hearing this, the others fully approve of the Dark District, and Libra even suggests they should join the Dark Wing's side during the Civil War, but Luphas tells her she doesn't plan on taking a side at all. If a civil war breaks out, this nation will fall and it will give the demons the perfect opportunity to invade, so they have to prevent that at all costs, and to that end, she asks Libra to capture Jupiter next time she sees him. Libra asks if they mean she's barred from killing Jupiter, so Luphas tells her they need him alive so they can force him to testify in front of all the Heaven Winged. However, Libra's safety is still Luphas' top concern, so she asks her to be careful about how she confronts Jupiter next time. Later that night, Luphas is busy alchemizing some more ammunition for Libra, and she wonders how things ended up like this. She initially only came here because she wanted to meet with Merak and find out whether he's a player or not, but now she's stuck trying to stop a civil war. Meanwhile, out in the forest, Jupiter is throwing a temper tantrum because with Libra around, he can't risk getting close to the city anymore. And if she's there, then that means Luphas must also be around, and that puts the whole plan of destroying the city at serious risk. Just then, Venus shows up and asks Jupiter why he's so upset, but he doesn't appreciate the patronizing tone, especially when Venus did nothing to help him while he was being attacked by Libra. However, Venus says she had been waiting at their scheduled meeting point the entire time, but he never showed up, and that's not her fault. Jupiter asks why she led Lufus to the center of the city in the first place, but Venus tells him she's nowhere near strong enough to stop Lufus, so there was nothing she could do to prevent her from entering the city. Jupiter can't argue with that logic, but he is still really upset because the plan was to invite the Heaven Winged into starting a civil war and destroying themselves so the demons could swoop in and destroy Merak, but with Libra on the lookout for him now, Jupiter can't get anywhere near the city without her finding him. Venus says she feels a little guilty about not assisting him earlier, but that's why she's offering to help him out now. She says she can keep Libra busy for him so he can carry out his plan, but she can only manage around 20 minutes, so he's going to have to work quickly. Meanwhile, back in the city, Lufus has just finished alchemizing the ammunition Libra requested, so she calls her in so she can take what she needs, but she wasn't expecting Libra to lift her skirt over the ammo, and somehow it all just fits in there. But Lufus has no idea how. Libra thanks Lufus for the ammo and promises that the next time she sees Jupiter, he won't escape her. But on another note, Libra asks if she knows where Dina went because her sensors indicate that she's not within a 100-kilometer radius of this city anymore. Lufus tells Libra she doesn't need to worry about that because Dina is simply able to use teleportation magic to go wherever she wants, so she should be back any moment now. However, Libra has a few questions about that because she wonders if the teleportation magic Lufus is referring to is X-Gate. As far as Libra knows, there are no other spells in this world that allow teleportation aside from the X-Gate spell, and when Lufus tries to put some serious thought into it, her head starts hurting. There was no such thing as teleportation magic 200 years ago, and such a convenient spell never existed in the X-Gate online game. In fact, in the game, X-Gate was just a term used as part of the setting, so no one could actually learn the spell, but if Dina was able to learn a spell like that and use it at will, what does that make her? Lufus doesn't understand why she's just now realizing this or why she hadn't questioned Dina's origins and capabilities at all till now. She probably should have done this sooner, but she tells Libra that once Dina gets back, they are going to have a little chat with her. A little while later, Dina gets back to the inn, but to her surprise, the room is completely dark and she is suddenly pulled into a chair with a spotlight in her face so she can be interrogated. Dina has both memory manipulation and teleportation magic, as well as a suspicious amount of talent and knowledge for someone who used to be an NPC, so there's no way Lufus would have actually forgotten about her if she were in the original game. First, Lufus asks Dina if her teleportation magic is actually the X-Gate spell, and Dina doesn't deny it, which comes as a shock to Lufus though now that she thinks about it. Dina has never really tried to hide her abilities, and Lufus does recall that the X-Gate spell was used to summon her to this world, so it's not like the spell is impossible to use for normal people. Still, it's odd that Dina is able to use it at will, so Lufus asks about her abilities, but Dina gets offended and starts yelling that she worked hard the last 200 years, so she would stand out more, and Dina seems really serious about it. So Lufus decides to drop the case for now. Dina is relieved that Lufus isn't suspecting her anymore, but now that the investigation is over, on a completely unrelated note, Dina mentions that she should be able to transport Libra anywhere she wants with her X-Gate ability. Lufus is surprised to hear that because earlier, Dina said it was complicated to transport other people, but she explains that since Dina is a golem, she is technically an object, so the restrictions of X-Gate don't apply to her. In fact, she suggests they should test it out right now, and Libra sees no issue with this since Jupiter hasn't made a move on the city, and it would be very unlikely that he would launch an attack in the short time that Libra will be gone. She tells Lufus she will be back in roughly 10 minutes, and both Libra and Dina teleport away, but not even 10 seconds later, Jupiter launches an attack and blows up a portion of the Lightwing district. This was the end of episode 8. Subscribe to not miss the next part.